Podcasting from Memphis, Tennessee. He's a soldier, storyteller, historian, and maybe a bit of a hellraiser. Click, listen, and enjoy. It's Dave Carter on the Ricochet Audio Network.
Hey there, gang, and welcome to the proceedings here. I am Dave Carter. It's a pleasure indeed to welcome you to the show today. How you doing, huh? Are you like me in that perhaps your fun meter pegged some time back, and now you absolutely dread pulling up the news on your computer or your phone, and you dread turning on the news on cable TV? I swear, some days I think that if there had been cable news and smartphones back when Rome was sacked, the scenes would look eerily like the chaos and the barbaric asininity that we see taking place in our country every single day. Here in Memphis, the news literally goes back and forth between laudatory coverage of these ideological misfits camping out on the front of City Hall, calling for defunding the police department. Just stop funding them. Then they switch over to live coverage of the latest crime scene, where someone has just been shot on the highway. Has happened just last night. Or as happened a few days ago, a girl and her boyfriend were arrested for drowning her father in the bathtub so that they could steal $300 from the man and his iPhone. How's that? That's just, what a place. This is, by the Washington Post's own numbers, this is the most violent city in the country on a per capita basis. So the local news shows the violence and then cuts to a glowing account of social justice warriors and their righteous crusade to get rid of the people who respond to the savagery around here. It's enough to make you drink. Speaking of which, well, I got to go to work today, so I guess I will. So how about we settle in for a relaxing chat with one of our favorite guests then? Does that sound all right? Now, for those of you who are familiar with this program, my guest is no stranger to you. Well, I mean, at least he's not stranger than, well, I don't mean strange as in, well, anyway, David Deeble is a professional comedian, unlike me, obviously. He's been on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, The Late Late Show, Last Comic Standing. He's been on CBS This Morning and the A&E program Ante Up. He divides his time between the U.S. and Germany, where his wife is from, and when he's in the U.S., he appears at the Comedy and Magic Club and has been known to MC at the Magic Castle in Hollywood. And it is a pleasure for this Dave to welcome that Dave to this Dave's program. How are you, that Dave?
I'm doing very well, Dave. Thank you for having me.
It's just a pleasure. Always enjoy talking to you. You know, we've had a little fun in the past at the expense of German audiences and how receptive they are to comedy and to laughter in general. With this hypersensitivity that we see now with respect to nearly everything, when it comes to comedy, do you think the rest of the world has finally caught up to Germany? Is that the trend line that we're seeing here?
Well, you know, the audiences I perform for out here, I only perform in English. So anybody who goes to one of my shows in Germany is attending an English language show, and they have been fine. And to be honest, you don't say whatever you want about Germans' reputation for comedy and what have you. The kind of radical political correctness that you'd find in the U.S. Doesn't really exist here. So I've got no complaints on that front.
That's good. Well, how are things over there, by the way? You guys have maniacs running around tearing the place up like we do over here?
Yeah, you know what? I haven't been to the U.S. since the coronavirus crisis, so I just know what I read and gather from the news. You know, we were a little bit ahead of you in terms of, you know, getting the virus, and so we're a couple of weeks ahead of you in all phases. But pretty much things have been parallel. I mean, I've had two people write me. One just wrote me this morning, "Oh, you must be so thrilled to be in Germany instead of the U.S." In fact, in Germany, a lot of the numbers, including in our region, are going in the wrong direction, and some of the reopenings have been rolled back, and lockdowns have become returned or become more aggressive because, for example, there was a big outbreak in a meat packing plant, as there was in the U.S. in South Dakota, I believe.
Okay, yeah.
And so, but basically things are pretty much tracking the way they are. It's hard to generalize about the U.S. because it's such a massive country. But obviously there haven't been massive outbreaks like there was in New York. But basically, there's things have been opening up for a month or 6 weeks now, more and more. We've been able to visit more and things like that. So it really hasn't really been much of a difference, except on the scale, probably.
It kind of reminds me. I was just thinking about this while you were talking. That do you remember George Carlin talking about he and Richard Pryor and the various physical maladies that they were going through? He said that Richard Pryor had a heart attack, and so George Carlin had a heart attack, and then he said Richard Pryor burned himself up. Caught himself on fire, and George Carlin said, "No, screw that! I'm going to have another heart attack." And so the little parallel thing going between us and Germany, I guess.
That's so funny because listening to that, I remember distinctly that routine. It was very funny, and I couldn't remember which one of them did it. But now, because I remember a punchline, which probably wouldn't be appropriate to say on the podcast, I realized definitely was a George Carlin routine. But yeah, it was very funny. Yeah, it's been that way. Germany's been cited as a model, but I can't help but think that a lot of my American friends tend to think that the U.S. is a hellscape and everywhere else, everyone's just partying. There's 1,000 people, they got the same problems. You really think young people in Germany want to be, cooped up, self-isolated any more than young Americans? Of course they don't. I think 1,000 young people recently were broken up, many arrested in Berlin for throwing a big party or festival, something like that. So, things are not quite as great here as many Americans might think, and I suspect things are not as bad in the U.S. as many Europeans might think.
Well, it depends. It's like you said, it's a big country. It depends on where you are. There are certain places that are just, as you call it, a hellscape, and others are not so much. So it just depends on where you are. One of the things that you do that I really, really appreciate and enjoy are the little asides that you share on Twitter and on Facebook, social media. You recently showed on Twitter this meme, which pretty well sums up the state of the entertainment industry, I guess. It has 4 photos. You may remember this. 3 of the photos, I guess there are 2 entertainers and 1 group of protesters, all holding signs that say silence equals consent. And then there's a photo of Bill Cosby just grinning like he's been handed a box of Jell-O pudding pops. Silence is consent. Cool. So, I mean, it's not impossible to find a reason to giggle, right?
Oh, no. I always think of how, the movie industry thrived during the Depression. If anything, getting paid to do shows might be difficult now, but the market for comedy certainly doesn't seem diminished. I mean, it's not like, people are too busy making money right now. A lot of people are locked at home and they can't visit or can't be visited. And oftentimes it's times like this where comedy is most valuable. I
guess in a way, I mean, this may be an inappropriate comparison, so naturally it sprang to my mind. But when sitting in class, and I was the class clown, or one of them, we're sitting in class and it's math or something that makes your hair hurt when you hear it, and maybe everybody is quiet. The teacher may be not in the best of moods. There's no better time to make a little fart sound, right? Because it just cracks everybody up at that particular moment. So I guess, in a way, this moment lends itself to the occasional wisecrack.
Yeah, or a fake epileptic seizure in the aisle, something like that. I never went there. Yeah, I mean, well, it's interesting. I mean, I always think of the Jews and the Holocaust and how so many of them were able to keep their sense of humor even in that horrible situation. And many believe, as I do, that it's what helped them to survive the Holocaust. And, 5 years after the end of the camps, and Germany was still in ruins, and the Jews had their own, own country for the first time in over a millennia. So I really do, think comedy is very, very practical.
Speaking of which, going back to George Carlin for a second, one of the things he used to say about his approach to comedy, he used to say that it was his job, part of his job at least, to remind us of stuff that we already knew, but we forgot to laugh at the first time. So, with respect to that, I want to play for you an audio clip. This has just been several years ago. There was a lady that called into a radio show, and she was complaining about the placement of deer crossing signs. Let me play this for you for just a second here.
Deer crossings aren't telling deer that it's safe to cross there. It's just more of like an alert for drivers so they know it's like a high deer population.
The government put the deer crossings there. They can direct the deer population anywhere they want to by moving that deer crossing sign. I mean, why in the world would they place it on the highway or the interstate You know? I mean, God, there are so many other places I can think of than putting the deer crossing signs on busy highways and interstates.
You seem to be under the misunderstanding that the deer are somehow attracted to the deer crossing sign.
Well, yeah, the deer crossing sign is there to allow the deer to know that's where they need to cross.
Right. And all these car accidents you had involved a deer after you'd saw a deer crossing sign.
Exactly. I mean, I'm trying to watch out for the deer, but I mean, speed limit's 55, 65. How am I supposed to, you can't brake really quick if if the deer just is crossing in that deer crossing area.
So you'd like to see these signs move somewhere safer?
Right. If we can move them, don't put deer crossing signs on the interstate or freeways. Put them in.
Okay. Anyway. I mean,
I tell you, that guy, the radio show guy, the host, has the patience of Job. Unbelievable.
I know. Now, imagine, if you will, this lady deciding which statues these idiots are going to tear down. And that's pretty much where we are at this point. Which I guess one of the things that you wrote that I kind of saw it and then thought of this, you wrote, quote, "Who saw weed being legal but not union generals?" I mean, again, you can't, if you sat down and said, I'm going to think of something, I'm going to think of the most stupid thing that two-legged mammals can do. You couldn't come up with this. You just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I only apologize because I try not to laugh at my own jokes. It wasn't until you said it. I realized that was me. I thought
it was good.
I can't remember who's the conservative actor. I would say plural, but there's only one guy. I can't think of his name. He's on Twitter all the time.
Yeah, yeah, and I think
it doesn't matter. In any event, he just posted a video of there's this crowd and crowd noise, but basically they're trying to topple a garden gnome. It's so funny. Yeah, I'll send it to you. But if you never say the internet or even Twitter wasn't good for nothing, right?
And there was the video I saw this morning of some guy trying to climb up this huge pedestal to get to a memorial of some guy on a horse, and
I saw that,
and he fell. So gravity won, idiot 0, right? So gravity won that one. You know what? I'm so squeamish about those videos, and as much as easy, I had to look away. Although I did start it a second time, and still I had to look away. But yeah, of course, it matters who's doing it. I mean, this guy. Well, let's just put it this way. I hope he's okay. Yeah,
and,
of course.
But there's nothing to learn from the second kick of a mule, right? If you didn't learn the first time, then you're not going to be learning anything the second time.
Yeah, it's funny when Wile E. Coyote has an issue, but when a human being has, I mean, it's not pleasant. But it's in a cosmic sense, it's okay. I guess I'm getting cynical with all this. I guess whenever you approach this stuff, I mean, writing humor, you're walking kind of a tightrope here, like I am right now, right?
Well, of course, if you're as reckless as I am with your career, it doesn't really matter. No, I don't know. I mean, I try not to be partisan. I always assume that there's a long tail out there, and there's a lot of untapped markets of people who that I give voice to, not me alone, of course, but so rather than trying to take a big fat chomp out of as corporations are doing, bending over each other to establish their anti-racism bona fides. I think there's a lot of people there who are thirsty for common sense, and that in the end, that you can do quite well playing to people along the margins there, because there's so many of them now, and on the internet, it makes it easy to find them and for them to find you.
That's true. Well, speaking of folks on the margins and trying to get things going, what's it like for you right now with respect to stage shows or cruise lines? I mean, all that's come to a halt, I imagine. Yeah,
I don't know, David. The cruise line's been affected. I haven't read anything.
I don't know.
I was on a cruise actually when the whole Diamond Princess fiasco was unfolding.
Yeah.
And I came home, and then then we started the lockdowns and things like that. So I get emails from my agent on a regular basis with updates. And I don't know, a lot of people in the industry seem awfully sanguine to me. Like a lot of them, cruise directors and other entertainers posting pictures of cruise ships saying we'll be back. I don't know. A lot of people, I think, presume that to be a threat, but I don't see. I mean, good Lord. I mean, these things have to sail full, right? And now it seems to be taken for granted that if they're going to socially distance people and do all the new protocols they're going to have to do, they're going to have to sail half full, not to mention countless other logistical nightmares. So, like I said, I get these emails from my agents with all these ambitious plans, various cruise lines saying we're going to, Princess is going to be back in June and All in America in July and Royal Caribbean in August. And then I get my last email I got is that the entire association has declared none of them are going to come back before September. So that's where we are now. But I do have a show. I have my first socially distanced show. I've been to a couple of shows here in Germany, outdoors, which is fun.
Okay.
To be performing out in Cologne in July. So that should be an interesting experience. I hope it is. It's an English language show. So I'll record it and post it on the internet, and you can see how it went.
Very cool. I actually went to Cologne. It was in '89. Beautiful place. We went into the cathedral. And
that thing's massive, huh? Unbelievable in scale.
I felt like an ant standing up next to a redwood. It was just insane.
Yeah, very few buildings, let alone churches, are that impressive. Just the sheer magnitude. But you step out of the train station, and the sky just disappears. It's just like a city block of church.
Right.
Yeah, it's a great town. Were you in the service then, or what?
Yeah, I was stationed. I was in the Air Force, and we went to Germany for 2 or 3 months to work. We were stationed with the Germans, doing some things, and I had a day to myself, so I took a side trip over to Cologne, and it was stunning. I was reading at that time the biography of Baron von Richthofen, the Red Baron. And he talked about his first flight. He wasn't even flying. He was just, riding in the plane. And the propeller, the prop wash took his helmet off. It took his gloves off while he was trying to put those on, took his goggles off, and the plane took off. And he said the first thing he saw way in the distance as they climbed to whatever altitude they're supposed to be at was the cathedral at Cologne.
Yeah.
So, and when you walk in the place and you see the stone steps and they're curved, with centuries of people walking up those steps, it really is amazing.
Well, yeah, I emphasize the size of it, but yeah, you for the outside, especially the inside, it is remarkable. That's something my wife being she sings at a lot of weddings, so I mean for her that's a venue, So you imagine what it must be like if you're a singer with singing, in incredible acoustics of those.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
500 years old.
Oh, that's amazing. So last topic here. When you broach the subject, former Vice President Joe Biden, and I'm going to do another good quote from you, is he said, Biden is poised to essentially become the first man to win the presidency posthumously. and again, I mean, that's a subject that has to be addressed with at least some sensitivity. I understand. I mean, apart from policy differences, which are legion, there's a legitimate question of cognitive ability, right? Or the deterioration of cognitive ability on his part. And, for example, my dad had Alzheimer's. Loved him dearly, razor-sharp mind, smart as a whip, but he had Alzheimer's, and there was that definite slowing of the mental gears. It was accompanied by a very real mental fog, so that I was not interested in piling a whole bunch of new responsibility on him when he was in that state, right? I mean, have breakfast. I'll visit with you. We'll talk, but I'm not going to ask you to be commander-in-chief. It's just not a good idea. So I'm not sure. I assume, once again, you have to hit that with a light touch, right?
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah, the devil's in the details. And like you said, the fact is he's running for the presidency. And plus, the media's doing everything it can to drag him across the finish line. Yeah. And we're supposed to pretend that he's not in what is obviously the middle stages of dementia or otherwise some sort of mental decline, and he's never been an above average intelligence guy in the first place. And I don't even mean that as a criticism. Some people are just dumber than others.
Right. Yours truly, for example. Yeah.
So obviously, he'll be the jury president, but the de facto president will be, his vice president, and he'll be a placeholder candidate, and he'll have an army of aides and heads of agencies and cabinet members that'll be furthering the leftist agenda, and he'll sort of be the sort of an empty suit.
Right,
he's not
yeah,
all there. I mean,
yeah.
it's funny. I don't think he's been asked whether he'll run for a second term, since it's unclear whether he'll be able to complete a first term. I mean, he would be 83, I believe, in the first year of his second term, and we think of the people in their early 80s in our own lives, whom we love dearly, and we think, good, yeah, like you said. I mean, I think the real story is that it's not something that's supposed to be talked about in polite company. Whereas when Reagan was president toward the end, he experienced some cognitive decline, and of course, it was considered the end of the world.
Right. Yeah. I was texting with my cousin yesterday, and we hit this subject briefly. And I posited my own theory that when he has his press conferences and does his talks and things from the basement, that he's actually he's blinking SOS and Morse code as he's talking. People, get me out of this situation, please.
Well, it's so funny. I see these clips. They say it's sort of like a WTF is Biden saying.
Yeah.
So I go, can it really be that bad? In fact, there was a hilarious one the other day where he was on a split screen with Obama, and good Lord, I mean, I felt bad for the former president. Can you imagine? First of all, my understanding is that Obama never had a whole lot of respect for Biden. He chose him for purely political purposes. Mm-hmm. And now he's got to sit and listen to Joe Biden and, kind of quasi-endorse him. And in this clip, he's pretending, he's listening to what Biden's saying, and, nobody can make heads or tails of it.
Yeah,
and,
you can see it register in his mind.
Poor
like,
Obama,
yeah,
he's got to keep this straight face as if, he's as mellifluous as Obama was, when in fact most people can't even get a handle on what he's going for.
Right.
I don't know if you saw the video. There's a hilarious video of him. He's mumbling something, and he's looking down, and finally he looks up at the camera, and his mask is hanging from the side of one ear.
Yeah.
You don't see it when he's looking down, and it's comical.
It is, and if I'm his family, I'm saying, Pop, please just have a seat. You don't need to be putting yourself through this. You just don't need to do this. It's not right.
Well, it was him or Bernie Sanders, so you almost gotta feel bad for him.
Yeah.
So
Oh, man,
they had he's the worst possible choice except for all the others.
Right. Yeah, I think so. The biggest question I guess will be who's going to be the presidential ventriloquist if he gets it. So now, if folks want to find you on the internet, Mr. Deeble, what sites or platforms or places would you recommend they visit?
Well, if you want to see a lot of topical stuff on Twitter, I'm at David Deeble. Or if you want to see my work, my stand-up comedy and my comedy juggling act, things like that, you can just search David Deeble on YouTube, find my channel. You can enjoy some of my comedy that way.
Good. Oh, and one last quote. I just remember this one that you made, and if this is a great endorsement of progressivism. One problem which can be solved by throwing money at it is a stripper. There we go.
There we go. Words to live by. I'm so glad, Dave. You got to collate my material for me. I don't realize how funny I am until I hear someone else quote it back to me. I think, good Lord, I'm onto something there.
Have you do an anthology or a best of album? I think that'd be a good idea. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right, David, man, it's been a pleasure as always to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Likewise, Dave. Hey, my pleasure, and I'd be happy to be back anytime. It's always a lot of fun, Dave.
We need to get you back on with Sussman.
Yeah, absolutely. The Dave Power Hour.
Yeah,
the All Dave Power Hour.
The Dr. Dave Show. That'd be a lot of fun. Okay, we'll do that again. All right, man. Thank you so much. You take care.
Bye-bye.
Folks, that's comedian David Deeble on the Dave Carter Program.
Compelling conversation and maybe a giggle or two. It's Dave Carter on Ricochet.
Well, David Deeble was funny, wasn't he? He's a lot of fun. He's one of those rare personalities that he can take sort of take the sting off of the day's bad news, right? I mean, in a healthy way. It's good to see the humor in the list of stupid things that we see and hear each day. And humor is therapeutic. It's a therapeutic remedy, right? So it keeps us from going, well, nuts, I guess. Speaking of therapeutic remedies, if I can manage to pronounce it, have you joined the festivities here at Ricochet yet? I mean, there's plenty of meaty substance to clamp your mind down on. From former Secretary of Education Bill Bennett's show to Jonah Goldberg's show, The Remnant, to Law Talk with Richard Epstein, John Yoo, and Troy Sinek. Then there's the flagship podcast with Peter Robinson, Rob Long, and James Lilacs, and their all-star lineup of the best minds and personalities and newsmakers that you'll find anywhere. Now, let's say you want to be a part of the festivities here. Well, how does that work? First, you can pony up $4.50 a month, and that lets you look behind the paywall at the member post, and this is where the really interesting action is on Ricochet. You can read all that stuff behind the paywall. You can comment on the member posts that you'll read. You can, of course, hear all the podcasts and comment on those as well, and you can comment on the main feed post and interact with contributors like the aforementioned Peter Robinson or Rob Long. And if you're really hard up for conversation, then you can write to me in the comments to my post as well, and I'll more likely than not, I'm going to write back. Now, if you want to write your own articles and see them published on one of the most influential websites out there, then it's going to cost you 50 cents more a month. Not bad. $5, right? And you're in. But we got a little something special for the listeners to this program. All right? So nothing but the best for the best. So if you go to ricochet.com/gumbo, you can get a free 30-day membership. You get the keys to the whole kingdom here. Walk in, check out the furniture, read what you want, write what you want, and see what you like and see what you think about it. At the end of the day, you have a free 30-day trial, and then $4.50 gets you in the door after that, or $5 gets you in if you want to write and publish your own article. It's not a bad deal. So go to ricochet.com/gumbo. That's ricochet.com/GUMBO. Check it out and join the conversation.
Discreet location in Memphis, Tennessee. Far from matches and sharp objects. It's Dave Carter on Ricochet.
All right, now this is the segment that's going to be loads of fun to do here. I'm going to really enjoy this segment because I have the pleasure of talking to a relatively new member. And remember, folks, if you head over to ricochet.com/gumbo and join the proceedings, you too might wind up here on the program, but don't miss out on it. Now, as I say, my guest is a fairly new member, and he's already started his own podcast, and it's a fascinating show as well. Nick Plosser joined our merry band of Ricochet folks just a few months ago in March of this year. He was born and raised in California, has done a great deal of traveling over the years. He taught English in Taiwan. And then he's also lived in China, Hong Kong, England, and then India, I believe. So, of course, it's very good of him to sit still long enough to talk to us today. Nick, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the program, sir. How are you?
I'm great, Mr. Carter. Thank you so much for having me on. And I will say, all that reflects is that I just haven't been successful at anything long enough to stay in one place.
Yeah, I totally understand because when I tick through the different jobs that I've had, people say, "So you just can't hold a job, can you?" So yeah, I totally get that. So this shiny new podcast that you've got is called the 0.5% Podcast, and it focuses, if I'm correct, on long-form interviews with active duty troops, veterans, and military retirees. Do I have that right?
That's right.
Okay. So
yes.
The name 0.5% is in reference to what?
The 0.5% is a rough approximation, but at any one time, about 0.5% of the U.S. population is active duty. Now, I made it that obviously I wanted to interview reserves, retiree, didn't matter. But I like the name because it captured what I was trying to do with the show, which is to say that there's a very small portion of the population that chooses a career in the military and to stand on that wall for us.
Okay. Now, how long does the typical interview last on your show, or does it vary widely, or how's that go?
Well, so far I've only gotten 5 in, but typically, usually about an hour. But I leave that totally up to the guest because the whole point of this is for the service member to tell his or her story. That's the point of it. So my first one with Jay, that went over 2 hours, and we probably could have gone another 24 if we wanted to. But some people have more to say, some people have less. But really, I leave that up to the guest.
And when the story is compelling, which I'm sure it invariably is with these folks, the time just passes very quickly, I would imagine.
don't even notice it, to be honest. And I think that's probably true with you, with what you love to do. I really enjoy the process of the podcast, the medium itself, because it really allows you and the guest to have a conversation and expand on ideas and work through ideas. And I think the Brett Weinstein said it best Weinstein said it best when he said that the podcast is just basically the old campfire that all our ancestors sat around discussing things, but now it's mic'd up.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And my favorite kind of interview, where I sense is the way this one's going as well. It starts out as an interview and it ends up as just a fun conversation between friends. And that's the way it ought to be. Now, you mentioned that the stories that you hear from those who have actually served are rather different from popular opinion of vets, or I think you referred to them sometimes as caricatures. So what do you see as the difference between veterans as represented in popular culture versus the real vets that you talk to?
The main difference is that, there's not a uniform story. They're not the automatons that you see caricatured in movies or in some movies, in most movies, I think, actually. Right. In the media, for sure. And, the overseas, that's how this podcast originally formed. The idea was 20 years of living overseas and hearing what people said about people who served in our military, as opposed to the people that I knew who were friends of mine and family members. And I just knew that the stories were far more compelling and deep and not made out of a cookie cutter. People had deep feelings, the people that choose to serve. And as you know, you are a veteran yourself. You have deep feelings about this country and reasons that are not just the Hollywood caricature, which is the poor down on his luck guy has no other option from a small town, and it seems to be that or the wisecracking guy from Brooklyn, and there's so much more in between, and that was the genesis of this podcast, is to get into those stories.
You're right, and I see, or I have seen a lot of the two-dimensional characters or caricatures of military folks as mindless automatons with a bloodlust. They just want to get out and kill something, and they'll point it wherever the boss tells them to point, and shoot, and it takes away the human element, really.
That's right, and that's 100%.
And as I'll go back to one of my favorite little talking points here. But as a historian, history is biography, right? It's about people. And so that's right. That element needs to be there. So thank you for bringing it to the foreground.
Well, 100%. I appreciate you agreeing to have me on and spread the word, because I think I really wanted to do something positive. In light of all the contentiousness online, it's one of the reasons I joined Ricochet. Shout out to everybody at Ricochet. I love the civil dialogue, and I've tried to convert as many people to become members as well. It's a nice respite from Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff, because it's just far too contentious and nothing really gets accomplished.
We need to make you an ambassador here. This is great. You've been a member of Ricochet for a relatively short time, but you've been reading and listening to Ricochet for quite some time now. Is that correct?
That's right. And since the beginning, actually, I was just talking with Mr. Carter before the show, you before the show, and we said I thought it was 2011, 2010, and I was overseas at the time, back and forth. And I love the format. I love the idea. Again, it was an oasis of civility, and there were serious people on there. Rob Long, Peter Robinson. I've been watching Uncommon Knowledge for a long time, so on and so forth. And I read your stories, as I told you before the show. So I really gravitated towards it, watched it grow. Probably just too much of a cheapskate to join, to be honest, but downloaded the podcast. But no, in all honesty, once COVID hit, I said this was time to do this. I was tired of the rancor in the other sites, and so I just wanted to be a part of that community and of people who deal with each other in a civil manner. I've been with it since the beginning. I
appreciate that. Now, if I may be so bold as to correct you on one point, because I know if he were in on the conversation, he would do so. You talked about serious people, and then you mentioned Rob Long, and I can hear him saying, "Excuse me, hello, no."
Hopefully he doesn't take that as an insult. I've I've been watching from Cheers to all the way to the Ricochet podcast every week. So hopefully he doesn't take that as an insult.
No, he's very charitable. If he's like me, he's been called worse, so it's okay.
That's right.
So you finally became a member. Thank God. I'm glad you're here because you had a lot to it. There's something that you wrote to me in our correspondence leading up to our chat today, and I think it's a very important point to make. So I'm going to quote you, if I may, please.
Yes.
You write, quote, "With the last few years of hyper-partisan political discord, I wanted to do something positive and finally give this podcast a go," unquote. Now, let me just say, this project that you've got to give voice to those who have served and to hear their stories is, in my opinion, exactly what we need, and I don't think it could come at a better time. As a vet, more importantly, as someone who's quite frankly alarmed at how quickly civil society is dissolving right in front of our eyes, people need a place they can go where they can unplug from the madness and tune in to real patriots, real public servants, and the kind of folks who stand between us and those who would like to take advantage of our attention that's diverted to the lunatics among us. So all that to say thank you. This is exactly what we need at exactly the right time.
Well, that's all very kind and much better said than I could say. I just wanted to, when this whole thing was coming, especially in the wake of the George Floyd incident and the rioting and all that, I just said I still have a fundamental belief in this country, and it's strong, and I don't think that's changed by recent events, and I think we will survive and get through this and be stronger for it. But I always look to people like Mike Rowe or Gary Sinise, who are fundamentally decent people,
right.
and use their platform to just highlight everyday people doing good things. And those two have always been kind of an inspiration for me. And I said, well, what am I adding to this? Am I just going online and adding kindling to the fire, or am I going to do something positive? And so whatever my minuscule little tiny way to do something positive, even if it's just one person that listens and says, hey man, maybe I'm going to give this vet or this active duty guy a different look and not just be so quick to write him off as you say earlier, an automaton or anything like that there's a real flesh and blood human being behind that who has deep meaning to behind his or her service, then this podcast will be worth it for me.
Folks, are you hearing this? Because you need to. This is good stuff, and this is the kind of thing we need to hear. Now, the name of your podcast is called the 0.5% Podcast. Where can folks find that, please?
It's on any directory you listen to podcasts, Apple, iTunes, Google, Stitcher, Spotify. It's on all those. I have an Instagram page, again, at the 0.5% Podcast. Twitter is there as well. I have a Facebook group for that. And I'll have a website up eventually if I can ever figure out how to knock two rocks together, which might take a while. I'm not the most technologically proficient person, Mr. Carter, I'm sorry to say, but as you found out before the show. But no, it'll be up. It's just a work in progress. As I said before, I'm a below a nickel and dime operation at this point, so we're just trying to get it going. And but I'm available on all those. You can follow the podcast, and I update it regularly on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Have you put them on YouTube as well?
They are, yes. Thank you for mentioning that. I forgot to mention that. I have a YouTube channel, again, the 0.5% Podcast as well. Try to make it as easy as possible to find. But, yeah, I put all the episodes up on YouTube. I'm in the process of cutting up some smaller clips, a la Joe Rogan's show. What he does, kind of puts 10-minute clips up there as well. So, that's there as well.
And as a testament to your questionable judgment at times, I guess, you invited me on the program. So
I didn't know if you wanted to drop that.
No, I might as well.
You're going to be to suffer for your sins. You're going to be a guest on my show as well.
So we'll be doing that here soon. And let me tell you right now, I was filling out the little questionnaire that you sent me, and these stories just immediately come flooding back. Many of them I had forgotten about. So when I'm on your show, just tell me to shut up at the appropriate time. Have you ever had someone, that drops by your house unexpectedly, and then they stay, and they stay, and you find yourself wanting to say, it's good of you folks to drop by, and thank you for refusing to leave. However, so
don't go away mad, just go away.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Bill Buckley years ago, whenever it was time for his guests to leave and they were overstaying their welcome, he would go to the piano and start playing "Good Night, Ladies." And that was good. That was their cue. Now I don't have a piano here, and I can't make smart ass remarks because my wife would be mortified. So
right.
but just tell me to shut up whenever I need to.
Well, no, I'm really looking forward to it, and I appreciate you. What I found with talking with these service members, whether active duty or retired, you find that once as you say, it starts out as kind of an interview. Once they get over that initial, you won't have this problem because you've been broadcasting forever. But once they get over this initial kind of deal that this is an interview, and really it's not. It's just a conversation for them to tell their story. And once they get over that, man, it's funny because almost everybody I've talked to has come back after and said, dang it, I wish I would. I remembered something, and I wish I would have talked about this, and that. And it kind of comes flowing out of them. And that was the whole point of this, is that I believe that everybody that chooses that career has a spark in them, pretty much, and has something interesting in it. And I think it's, hopefully, if I'm even remotely good at my job, is to pull those stories out of them, because I think they're there for everybody, even for whatever job, whatever their MOS was in the service, it doesn't matter. Yeah. There's good stories in there, and I tried to get into the Marine Corps and was too old and had a bad back and wasn't good enough. So this is the next best thing for me to do. There's everybody I've ever talked to that's been in the service. Once you start getting, with the aid of maybe some bourbon, which you are welcome to indulge in if you want.
I have a pharmacy next to my desk here. So
okay. Well, we're good. And, I just found that there's stories there, and there's really interesting stories in there. And it's, if I'm any halfway decent at what I do, it's hopefully to pull those stories out, and for the listener to kind of get a little window into what people who've chosen that job actually do, because there's so many jobs within the service, and there's so many interesting places that people go and things like that. So that's the purpose of the show.
Well, this is the first time that I've talked to you, and I can tell right away that you're going to do fantastic. I mean, you've got a great presence on mic, and it's very easy to talk to you. I mean, I felt like I've known you for years here, so this is fantastic. So I'm really
that's very kind. Very
really
kind.
Looking forward to it.
Wife would probably beg to differ on that, but I appreciate
you. You can beg all you want, but Well, this is spectacular. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you for taking the time to be on the program.
Mr. Carter, thank you so much. And again, I really appreciate your help with spreading the word on the show. And if anybody listening has stories, please reach out, and we'll set up and get you on the show. But in the meantime, I'm really looking forward to doing your show, Mr. Carter. So thank you so much.
Me as well. Thank you so much, folks. That is Nick Plosser, fantastic guy, and he's on the Dave Carter program. And I can't talk to him soon.
It's the Dave Carter Show on Ricochet.
I sort of hit the button too soon and cut myself off at the end of the interview. That's bright. Man, how great was that, though, huh? Nick is a wonderful and articulate gentleman, isn't he? Talking to vets, active duty, Guard, and Reserve, and getting those inspiring stories of American greatness out for everyone to hear. I mean, how cool is that? Hey, tell me what you think of this quote, okay? I'm going to say this, let's see. I wish this song would end. There we go. All right, let me see what you think of this quote. It says, "We will raise the next generation. We will teach our children that they live in a land of legends and that nothing can stop them or hold them down. You can do anything. You can be anything, and together we can achieve anything." It's pretty cool. Does that sound inspiring? Does it sound positive? Does it call out the best in us as Americans and remind us that we come from the best and that we stand on the shoulders of giants? Because those were the words that President Trump used last night at Mount Rushmore. Those are the words that the New York Times calls dark and divisive. Nonsense. I call it inspirational. And I say we need more of our leaders to grow a spine and stand up for what our vets and our active duty troops have done and are doing to this day. Same goes for the police and our other first responders. They deserve our thanks and our respect, not the morons and malcontents and ideological misfits who are trying to purge our culture and erase our history. So remember the positive and be the one who inspires more of it. Now, if you want to hear and read more of this kind of thing, I urge you to go over to my own website, DaveCarterOnline.com, and have a look at the collection of my writings and podcasts. I've got some good sources of information from all over the place there. And I wrote a piece on the website just a couple of days ago. It's called, the page on the website is called The Inkwell. And the piece itself is called Voices in the Wilderness. Let me know what you think of it, if you're so inclined. And that's at DaveCarterOnline.com. With thanks to comedian and my friend David Deeble and the fantastic Mr. Nick Plosser, whose podcast, The 0.5%, is certainly worth your time to check out. And with special thanks to you, the listener, I'm Dave Carter. I'll see you again soon, and happy Independence Day.
Thank you for listening to The Dave Carter Show. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you won't miss a single episode. And while you're there, please leave a review and tell us what you think. And on behalf of all of us at The Dave Carter Show and the Ricochet Audio Network, thank you for listening.